The words my husband's boss shared with me in confidence were unexpected, and what followed truly changed my perspective. Disbelief. We warmly encourage you to interact with our video by giving it a thumbs up, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing to accompany us as we reveal our newest narratives. At 63, I find myself in a scenario I never could have imagined. It appears that life was destined to adhere to a particular cadence by now. The mornings unfurl softly as I tend to my garden. Afternoons meander into tranquil moments immersed in the pages of a book, and evenings are spent with my husband, Richard, as we ponder the intricate tapestry of our shared history. On a certain evening, a profound exchange shifted my perspective, compelling me to reconsider my grasp of the world. It all started at a corporate gala hosted by Richard's company. For over 3 decades, he dedicated himself to his craft, rising through the ranks with unwavering devotion. Thomas, my superior, exuded a quiet power, a presence with whom I had exchanged only brief, polite dialogues during previous events. In his mid-60s, he stood tall and distinguished, radiating a serene confidence that seemed both effortless and deeply resonant. The gala unfolded within the lavish confines of a downtown Chicago hotel, where the grand chandeliers cast a soft glow, wrapping the elegantly dressed guests in a tranquil embrace. The room was alive with the soft hum of conversation, the tinkling of glasses, and the mellow notes of a jazz band tucked away in the corner. Yet, amidst this vibrant atmosphere, I felt a distinct lack of joy in such gatherings, preferring instead the quiet comfort of my own solitude. Richard's persistent urging prompted me to slip into a modest navy blue dress and accompany him for this event. Upon initial observation, all seemed to align perfectly with expectations. While Richard delved into profound discussions with his colleagues, I discovered comfort in bonding with the other spouses, exchanging moments that resonated with significance and introspection. In that instant, Thomas approached me with a quiet intensity. "Margaret, may I have a moment?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth, cutting through the noise of the bustling room. I hesitated, a wave of uncertainty sweeping over me. A moment? What could Richard's boss possibly want from me? Nevertheless, I managed a soft smile and a nod, permitting him to lead me down a serene side corridor, away from the lively atmosphere of the main ballroom. The ambience was tranquil, the remnants of the gala softly fading away. He guided me to a cozy lounge, a welcoming haven illuminated by gentle lights, a flickering fireplace, and plush leather chairs. An unvoiced tension hung in the air, subtly present yet palpable. A soft flutter in my chest accompanied me as I took my place in the seat across from him. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," he remarked, his smile laced with a touch of hesitation. "Not at all," I reassured him, though a tide of curiosity surged within me. "What's on your mind?" he sighed, his hands coming together in a delicate gesture, as though he were sifting through a cascade of thoughts. After a brief pause, he finally summoned his voice. "It's about Richard." At those words, I straightened in my chair, a knot tightening in my stomach. "Is something wrong?" He paused, his mind racing for the right words. "Not exactly. Yet there is a truth I believe you ought to hear." The weight of his words hung in the atmosphere, palpable even before they left his lips. His expression bore a gravity that awakened something deep inside me, a quiet intensity that quickened my pulse. "Margaret," he went on, his voice a comforting mix of warmth and determination, "I have been acquainted with Richard for quite some time. In my observations, I have seen him cultivate his career, elevate those in his orbit, and tenderly attend to his family. Throughout this journey, a quiet realization has surfaced." I inhaled deeply. "What does it signify?" He leaned in slightly, his gaze locking onto mine with a depth that felt almost weighty. "Richard is a good man, but I've observed that you frequently remain quietly in the shadows during these gatherings. Sometimes individuals like us are overlooked." The words lingered with a weight in my heart. My breath caught in my throat, and an overwhelming sense of protectiveness surged within me. I don't understand," I stammered. "Richard is an exceptional partner. He has always been that way," Thomas nodded. "I understand that he is. But you possess a quiet presence that many might overlook, yet it truly deserves recognition. I opened my mouth to respond, but silence wrapped around me. He pressed on, his voice now filled with a tender warmth. I've noticed how your eyes follow him, even when he seems far away, absorbed in his own thoughts. I've seen you stand quietly in the background at these gatherings, watching as he loses himself in his pursuits. You give so much, but does he ever give back? A constriction tightened around my throat. A deep desire to contest his viewpoint welled up inside me, yet a subtle doubt lingered in the recesses of my mind. I hope I'm not crossing a line, Thomas remarked, leaning back just a touch. But sometimes an outsider sees what those inside cannot. I exhaled slowly, my mind a tempest of thoughts. Thomas fixed his gaze upon me with a penetrating intensity, then offered a faint, knowing smile. Margaret, you deserve to be seen. The words echoed within me, stirring a forgotten part of my soul. After what seemed like an eternity, I discovered myself shrouded in a haze of uncertainty regarding my feelings. I stood motionless, ensnared in a fleeting moment of contemplation. Thomas's words echoed in my mind, stirring emotions I was unready to confront. You deserve to be seen. Had I genuinely lingered in the shadows all this time? I longed to brush off his words as mere observation, a well-meaning sentiment that fell short. Yet, deep within my soul, I felt the resonance of his words. Stephen was indeed a good man, a tireless provider. He had consistently been unwavering, reliable. In those quiet, weighty moments, I found myself pondering. When had he last truly seen me? When had he last acknowledged the delicate ways I sought to cultivate our shared existence, to infuse it with vitality? The care with which I folded his shirts to his liking, the thoughtful arrangement of our home, adorned with his beloved possessions, the unwavering support I offered during each of his professional triumphs, allowing my own reflections to take shape in the shadows. I cleared my throat, stifling the pain that had settled deep inside me. Thomas, he lifted a hand, halting my words. I have no desire to disturb you, Margaret. Still, I found myself unable to hold my tongue. I breathed out softly, recognizing the depth of your honesty. Finally, I found my voice, just a murmur. But after all this time with Stephen, I understand that marriage goes beyond what is seen. It resonates with the core of commitment and the bedrock of faith. Thomas nodded, a silent comprehension flowing between them. I understand, and I hold that in high regard. He leaned in slightly, his gaze unwavering and earnest. Yet have you ever paused to reflect on what you genuinely desire? The inquiry lingered in the air, echoing between us. What I desired. For an extended period, I devoted myself to comprehending Stephen's needs, satisfying the requirements of our marriage, and living up to the expectations set before me. Throughout all those years, I had never paused to consider my own yearnings. A gentle, hesitant laugh escaped my lips. Thomas, this conversation is quite unexpected for a corporate gala. His smile blossomed in reply. I suppose it is. Still, a quiet whisper within me compelled me to articulate it. A hush surrounded us, broken only by the soft crackling of the fire. He released a deep sigh as he stood up. I suppose I should allow you to return, he murmured gently. I mirrored his actions, my fingers quivering ever so slightly as I adjusted my dress. Indeed, Stephen will contemplate my absence. Thomas nodded, though his face bore a complexity that was challenging to interpret. Margaret bestowed upon me a promise, one that I cherished deeply. I tilted my head, a spark of curiosity igniting within me. What is that? Please do not dismiss my words so easily. Take a moment to ponder them. After a brief pause for reflection, I nodded softly. Very well. He gave me a slight smile, stepping aside and subtly gesturing toward the door, inviting me in. As I walked past him, I felt the soothing warmth of his presence close by, the weight of our earlier conversation settling deeply in my heart. The gala thrummed with vitality as I returned to its vibrant embrace. Stephen stood precisely as I had found him, deeply engaged in conversation with his peers. Initially, he remained oblivious to my existence. I stood back, quietly watching him unfold in his own world. His expression radiated vitality, and his hands wove through the air in a graceful ballet as he articulated his thoughts. There was an undeniable allure about him, a magnetic fervor and an unyielding ambition that drew me in. Still, I found myself drawn back to Thomas's words. Had Stephen ever looked at me with such fervor? As Stephen finally turned his gaze, he offered a familiar nod, a gesture I had witnessed countless times before. It dawned on me just how accustomed we had become to our routines. Thomas had planted a seed, and despite my efforts to dismiss it, I sensed its subtle growth unfolding within me. The path back was marked by a profound stillness. Stephen positioned himself next to me, his grip firm on the wheel, his gaze locked onto the dimly lit road stretching before us. The city lights flickered in a blur, while my mind drifted far beyond the confines of the here and now. Thomas's words echoed in my mind, his voice hauntingly insistent, lingering like a shadow that would not dissipate. You deserve to be acknowledged and appreciated. A brief moment allowed me to catch sight of Stephen. He looked fatigued, a faint crease of concern marked between his eyebrows. After nearly 4 decades of marriage, I had etched every subtle detail of his face into my memory. The sharp lines of his jaw, the soft crinkles around his eyes when he laughed, the determined set of his lips. Yet I found myself pondering the last time he had genuinely looked at me. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence that surrounded us. Did you find pleasure in the events of this evening? The question caught me off guard. He asked the question after every gathering, every assembly, every meal shared, almost as if it were a ritual rather than a genuine curiosity. I took a moment to reflect on my reply. It was captivating. He nodded, enveloped in contemplation. Excellent, excellent. And just like that, the conversation faded into a serene conclusion. I redirected my gaze to the window, watching as the city gradually receded into the distance while we traveled toward the tranquil suburbs. As we arrived, Stephen slipped into his well-worn routine, discarding his jacket, setting his keys on the counter, and making his way to his office for one last look at his emails. I stood in the kitchen, my mind adrift, staring at the empty space he had recently filled. I harbored no resentment towards him, not in the most authentic way. Stephen had perpetually embodied this essence, dedicated to his art, steadfast in his routines. He had bestowed upon me a life rich in fulfillment, characterized by a sense of stability. Yet Thomas's words had awakened a sensation deep within me, a feeling I could no longer contain. As I wandered toward the bedroom, a fleeting reflection in the mirror captured my attention. At 63, my once vibrant auburn hair now carried the soft whispers of silver. Fine lines graced my visage, each a mark of the path I had traversed over the years. Still, my gaze endures unaltered. In their depths, I unearthed an emotion I had long neglected, a deep and resonant solitude. I had always perceived this as just another aspect of aging, this quiet withdrawal into the background, this gradual slide into the ordinary. For the first time, I found myself questioning whether that was indeed the truth. The next morning, as Stephen set off for work, he pressed his lips softly to my cheek and murmured, "I'll be home late." The pivotal client meeting awaited on the horizon. I responded with a soft nod, paired with a subtle smile. All would be well, be well. And then he disappeared into thin air. I stood in the doorway, time stretching endlessly, before finally slipping back into the stillness of the room. My days are often filled with errands, household chores, or nurturing the garden. Today, an unsettling restlessness churned inside me. In the stillness of the kitchen, his words echoed through my thoughts. An overwhelming desire stirred within me to reach out to someone who had glimpsed a facet of my being that had faded into memory. I reached out to Thomas, not seeking guidance, but to engage in a conversation as two individuals contemplating the essence of life. Thomas answered on the second ring. "Greetings?" His voice carried a faint trace of astonishment. I took a deep breath, relishing the experience. "Would you be interested in picking up our earlier conversation over coffee sometime?" A stillness enveloped the air. Then, with a soft tone, he responded naturally. An hour later, I found myself sitting opposite him at a tranquil cafe by the lake. The scent of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked pastries filled the air, as outside, autumn leaves danced elegantly in the soft breeze. In the cafe, Thomas's voice carried a tone of respect and contemplation, reminiscent of a conversation shared with a dear friend. I was left in a state of uncertainty regarding the arrival of your message. As I swirled my coffee, I watched the graceful interplay of cream blending with the rich brew, my mind wandering to the question of whether I should make the first move. He nodded, his demeanor calm as he awaited my reply. I inhaled deeply, releasing the air in a gradual exhale. Your words have remained in my thoughts, inviting contemplation. His expression was shrouded in enigma. In the stillness of the moment, I collected my thoughts, and after a pause, our gazes met. You were indeed correct. His gaze held a glimmer, an elusive quality that slipped through my grasp of comprehension. Margaret, at times, it is essential to have an external perspective to gain a clearer understanding of ourselves. That was all I aspired to achieve. Yet, at a certain juncture in my journey, I feel I lost the capacity to yearn for something purely for my own sake. Thomas edged forward slightly. In that instant, I felt the weight of the air pressing down, each breath a battle against an unseen force. In that moment, doubt hung in the atmosphere, a quietness surrounding us, broken only by the distant whisper of voices echoing softly. Finally, Thomas shattered the stillness, his voice emerging gently. All I desire is for you to find joy. I looked at him, really looked. Before me stood a man unbound by any duty to engage in my existence, with no reason to utter the words he chose, except for the undeniable truth that he had glimpsed something within me that I had yet to uncover. In that instant, a wave of clarity enveloped me, unveiling the choice that awaited my decision. As I sat at the cozy cafe table, my eyes were drawn to Thomas, while my fingers tenderly embraced the comforting warmth of my coffee cup. My deepest wish is for you to discover true happiness. His words hung in the air, heavy yet gentle, echoing a truth I had long sought to avoid. For years, I persuaded myself that contentment was enough, that security, stability, and loyalty constituted the bedrock of a meaningful existence, and indeed, they did. Nevertheless, Thomas's words caused me to hesitate. Perhaps I had neglected my own desires amidst the familiarity of routine, yearning to experience genuine emotions once more. I took a deep breath, the weight of my thoughts wrapping around me. Thomas, I find myself at a loss for where to start, yet this has prompted a deep reflection on my identity, transcending the various roles I inhabit. His eyes grew tender. There is no requirement for you to take any action, Margaret. Not at this moment. Contemplate the sources of your happiness. When was the last time you immersed yourself in an activity purely for your own enjoyment? I opened my mouth to speak, yet a moment of hesitation seized me. When did that moment occur? Years were spent in the careful cultivation of Richard, protecting his dreams and preserving the delicate balance of his life. In the meticulous tapestry of my existence, woven with threads of order and routine, I began to grapple with the very essence of who I am. With each sip of my coffee, the rich, bitter warmth wrapped around me, providing a momentary feeling of stability. Who am I, outside the boundaries of my marriage? Unexpectedly, I found myself speaking words that surprised me. Thomas bestowed a soft, compassionate smile. It may be the moment to unveil the reality. A gentle, quivering laugh escaped my lips, an amalgamation of trepidation and doubt swirling inside me. It seems intimidating, maybe even insurmountable. Yet a subtle awakening stirred within me, not of love, but of introspection. I held my tongue, rendered speechless, for within me resided a subtle truth, a silent acknowledgement of his perception. We remained in silence for a while, surrounded by the soft cadence of existence beyond our tranquility. Cars drifted past, laughter danced in the atmosphere, and the gentle breeze murmured through the golden leaves of fall. Life surged ahead, offering scant opportunity for reflection. Yet for the first time, I felt it imperative to take a moment to stop. Finally, I set my cup down and met his gaze. Uncertainty looms before me, Thomas. Yet I recognize that the moment has come for me to welcome life again. A soft smile started to grace the corners of his mouth. That was everything I wished for you to comprehend. As the night unfolded and Richard made his way back home, I found myself seated at the kitchen table, enveloped in a quiet anticipation. He barely cast a glance in my direction as he set his briefcase down and loosened his tie. A long day it had been, he murmured, the weariness unmistakable in his voice. I watched him for a moment, this man with whom I had crafted a life, this man I had held dear for countless years. As he moved through the well-known corners of our home, an unvoiced chasm hung in the air, a quiet rift that had gradually expanded with the passage of time. With a deep breath, I collected my thoughts. Richard, may we have a conversation? He paused, his eyes eventually locking onto mine. Concerning what matter? I took a deep breath. Concerning us, his brows furrowed in worry. What is to become of us? I hesitated, wrestling with the gravity of my reflections, before finally voicing the sentiments that had been brewing inside me since the previous evening. I sense a profound invisibility. Richard. He blinked, momentarily caught off guard. What is this? It seems I have spent countless years embodying the role of a devoted wife, one who stands steadfastly by your side, ensuring that all aspects of our lives harmoniously align, and preserving the delicate balance that sustains us. Indeed, my affection for you runs deep. Yet, at some point during this journey, I slipped into the shadows. His expression transformed, unveiling his astonishment. Margaret, could you please share the source of this? I caught myself shaking my head in disbelief. It has resided in the depths of my being for an extended period. I never permitted myself to articulate it. He sank into the chair across from me, his hand grazing his face in a fleeting display of vulnerability. I was completely unaware that you were harboring such emotions. I watched him with a sharp focus. Have you ever taken a moment to contemplate? He stayed silent. In that ephemeral moment, a sharp realization pierced through my consciousness. Richard was not devoid of kindness as a husband. He had no desire to come across as unkind or indifferent. He had simply held the belief, much like I did, that marriage equated to a predictable rhythm, that a feeling of ease would be enough. Our once frequent communication faded, leaving us no longer compelled to connect as we once did. Yet, that routine felt emotionally distant. It lacked the depth I once cherished. Not any longer. What are you saying? He finally asked, his voice tinged with apprehension. I inhaled deeply. I must embark on a journey to reclaim the true essence of life for my own sake. His expression clouded slightly. Are you sharing something I should be aware of? I hesitated for a moment, then softly refused, shaking my head in quiet resolution. Uncertainty looms before me, Richard. Nevertheless, I am profoundly conscious that I cannot persist in this condition. For our marriage to stand the test of time, a change is imperative. He looked at me, his gaze lingering, and in that instant, I perceived a flicker of something awakening within him, a flicker of insight. Perhaps there existed a chance to repair what had been shattered. It's possible that there wasn't. For the first time in countless years, I found myself ready to pursue the truth.